Welcome everybody. Greetings from beautiful sunny Los Angeles here in California, where it's about 7:40 in the morning. Thanks everybody for attending. And as Mr. Jaffrey introduced this, what the purpose of today's presentation is to introduce the F.A.S.T government framework, flat, agile, streamlined, and tech-enabled government for the 21st century. That's what we'll be talking about. Go right ahead and move forward. I'll try to keep up. I realize there's a little lag time in the presentation. I'll keep up with this. The goals for our presentation this morning are to introduce the concept, to explore the relevance of F.A.S.T government, a new transformational government framework for government performance, which I believe is really the focus of this session and others that I will be doing when I get to Saudi Arabia, governance reform, and benchmarking. And finally, this last piece, I would really encourage everybody to participate. Part of what the World Economic Forum wants to do with the F.A.S.T government framework is to engage government practitioners, engage entrepreneurs, engage leaders in helping us shape this framework, potentially providing on-the-ground examples and case studies, maybe working with us, we can talk about this later, working with the World Economic Forum on partnering, potentially pilots and even workshops on delivering F.A.S.T government or transforming your agency or government for the F.A.S.T government future, and definitely providing feedback, suggestions, and critiques. We will be researching and modeling F.A.S.T government for the future, and certainly any other ideas. I truly want this to be interactive. Moving forward. I lost my drawing tool. I hope everyone can still hear me. Why now? Why F.A.S.T government now? And governments around the globe, as you can see, are facing unprecedented challenges. Rising expectations and new demands. Society is asking more than they can provide. I'm sure you all are experienced with that and can see that in your everyday. Scarce resources, scarce physical resources, scarce human capital resources, and scarce capital for moving public services forward. An important note here, increasingly networked and connected citizens, businesses, and civil society. Permanent changes in the global economy. We're seeing that around us every day. And then finally, looming demographic fault lines. Some of them, the youth bulge, the huge cohort of the younger generation coming through. And on the other end, the growing retiree and elderly cohort, which are demanding more and more services from us. And finally, the continued urban explosion, the migration of more and more people to urban centers, large metropolitan areas. With that said, what is F.A.S.T government? F.A.S.T government, it's not only about speed. It's not simply about being fast, and in fact, often we need our government to be thoughtful, deliberative. However, who among us wouldn't want faster response times, speedier service delivery, or more timely decisions? F.A.S.T government is really about creating models for open, effective, engaging, and responsive government that reflects 21st century needs and opportunities. That's the real focus of F.A.S.T government. Again, creating models for open, effective, engaging, and responsive government that reflects 21st century needs and responsibilities. More about F.A.S.T government. We want to emphasize that it's not simply a change or a transition or a reform, but it's truly transformational. Recently, in our opening at an Istanbul conference, Lord Mandelson from the United Kingdom called this a new way of doing government in the 21st century. not simply making changes around the edges, but truly changing the way we form government, the way we think about governance, the way we think about interacting with citizens and businesses. This next bullet, I think, is important because I specifically am an E-Government and a Gov 2.0 expert, and yet F.A.S.T government is specifically about moving beyond E-Government. In an earlier research paper that I wrote many years ago, I said that we'll know that E-Government has been successful when the E starts dropping away. And I think we've hit that point. This is the time to move beyond E-Government so that technology, digital, electronic are infused throughout government and governance, and we move to the F.A.S.T government model, which includes technology but is not about technology. F.A.S.T government puts government back at the center, front and center in the equation. F.A.S.T government is a new framework for open and effective government in the digital world. Again, flat, agile, streamlined, tech-enabled. We're going to talk about each of those points in a minute here. And finally, this is important, this has been spearheaded by the World Economic Forum, the Global Council on the Future of Government. In fact, just a few weeks ago, the Global Council on the Future of Government reconstituted itself for another 2-year charter, and the F.A.S.T government framework has risen to the top of the agenda for the World Economic Forum to work with governments globally at the national, supranational, regional, state, and local levels to change for the future into this F.A.S.T government model. So this is very important because there is a large thrust, a big supporting group, the World Economic Forum, behind the F.A.S.T government initiative, and I'd encourage us all to think about that, get involved, and figure out how you can work with us on this. Moving forward. Talking about each of the 4 pillars of F.A.S.T government. F.A.S.T, flat. Government must be flatter. Government must be flatter in 4 key areas. And these are 4 areas that each of you in your everyday practice can really think about, how do I bring this to bear in whatever I am doing on a daily basis. 4 key areas. Flatter in terms of citizen engagement, bringing government closer, flattening the distance between government agencies, government practitioners, and the citizens, your constituents, your businesses that you serve. Government must be flatter in administrative efficiency. Again, think of flattening. If I could be on video, I'd be showing you I'm bringing my hands together, flattening the distance between administrative processes, getting rid of certain administrative processes that no longer are relevant, flattening that. Government must be flatter in terms of decision-making processes. Again, fewer people involved, fewer decision-makers involved, making sure that decision-makers are collectively making decisions so that decisions are flattened in terms of time, the amount of information, who sees the information, and how those decisions are transmitted back to constituents. And finally, flattening, government must be flatter in terms of intergovernmental and cross-sectoral collaboration. This is important, again, for you all as government practitioners. Flattening the distance between your government partners, whoever they may be, local jurisdictions, national, regional, state, and local governments, governments across borders, and then most important in the 21st century, thinking about how technology, social media, the digital world has really changed the world within which we operate, must be flatter in terms of reaching outside the walls of government to other sectors, the private sector, businesses, the civil sector, NGOs, groups in society. Flattening the distance, flattening the spaces between those actors. What's the relevancy for high-performance government, for government practitioners in terms of the flatter pillar of the F.A.S.T government framework? Relevancy, keeping you in touch with your customer and constituents, actually being in direct touch with them, being more responsive, providing better responses. And then on the input side, your ability to gain better and more timely information on a regular basis. The second pillar of the FAST government framework, Agile. Government must be agile. What do agile governments do? What are the hallmarks of agile government? They leverage networks and are collaborative. Very agile, using the resources at your disposal, human resources, human networks, information networks, collaborating with those networks. That's what agile governments do. Agile governments respond and effectively organize. And I think important here, this is very important, they deorganize. The ability to deorganize. How many among you, think about it, once you've formed a new business unit or formed a new program or formed a new project, have seen that program or agency continue on basically forever? Governments are not used to deorganizing. So it's very important that agile governments can quickly organize around new challenges and then deorganize when those challenges change. Agile governments specifically develop agile workforces. I assume the very fact that most of you are on this line listening to this right now, you're interested in changing the way you operate, the way you practice, and that you all are part of this agile workforce. Mobile, tech savvy, multifaceted, the ability to do things, many different things, not simply specialized in one area. Team-oriented, innovators and problem solvers. That's what agile workforce is, and that's how agile workforces operate. Agile governments embrace and actually create flexible and adaptive regulatory and legal frameworks that foster innovation. I come from a legal background. I'm also have a past as a government attorney. And I can tell you the legal profession is one of the most conservative professions out there. And then add the legal profession inside the government framework and you get a highly conservative force. We want to change those forces to be much more flexible, adaptive, open to change so that we have agile policies, agile regulations, agile legal frameworks to enable agile government. And then finally, agile governments engage constituents, whether they're citizens, businesses, civil society organizations, other governments. They engage their constituents at any time, at any place, in the manner most appropriate for the context. That's really one of the powers of the new digital world we live in. We are able to engage anytime, anywhere. Agile governments have to be able to do that. And not only engage anytime and any place, but in the manner that's most appropriate, using social media, using new technology, face-to-face when appropriate, community forums, civic forums when appropriate. What's the relevancy for high-performance government and you as government practitioners about the agile pillar? Being agile allows you to be more responsive, increases your responsiveness, whether you're a service provider, an information provider, internal customer provider. You can be more responsive. It enhances and fosters continuous innovation, improvement, and even evolution. We want government to be constantly improving and evolving, not static, not in one place at one time. And then finally, important in today's new global economy and our constrained government resources, agile workforces within government definitely are leaner. We have smaller workforces, leaner, much more productive. The next pillar of the FAST government framework, streamline, the S. Government must be streamlined. I think that we've talked about this for a long time within government. How do we continue to streamline government, whether it's a national government, a national bureaucracy, or a local government? Streamline decision-making. Decision-making in a more continuous, iterative process as opposed to a linear process of the past. Streamline business processes and operations, everything from automating business processes, or again, making business processes more dynamic, more iterative, as opposed to linear. Government of the past was linear, very hierarchical. All of us actually work within those kinds of frameworks. We need to break those down and change them. Streamlined communications. That's communications internally, across governments, between governments, externally, reaching out to across borders and to your civil, business, and civic organizations that should be your partners. How do we streamline those communications? Again, in the new digital world, communications can be instantaneous, so the tools are at hand to streamline communications. We simply have to make that part of our everyday working. Streamlined access points for citizens and businesses, making sure that we have more and better access points where citizens and businesses can engage government. That's how we streamline the way we work within government. Streamline data and information sharing, gathering, dissemination. Again, the power of new cloud technologies, new data resources. One of the biggest pushes on the web and in technology right now is in the open data movement and the big data movement. These are huge opportunities and resources for us as government practitioners. How do we streamline that information gathering? How do we engage our customers to help us gather better and more data? And then how do we disseminate it back out to our customers, our constituents, our partners? And finally, streamline collaboration and cooperation. Again, making sure that we're using all the tools at our disposal to streamline the way we collaborate internally, the way we collaborate with other government agencies within our government. How do we collaborate with our users? These are all instances of how we can streamline the way we effectively do the business of government. Again, what's the relevance for us as government practitioners? What's the relevance for us as workers seeking high-performance government? What's the relevance for us as government leaders seeking to really change the way we deliver services? The streamlined pillar increases accountability and transparency. It allows our partners, our governments, our constituents to see what we're doing and actually experience what we're doing in a transparent manner. We know who's accountable for what decisions and what processes. Provides better access. And certainly by streamlining processes and streamlining the information gathering processes, we provide better data and information both for our government needs, but also for our public constituents. The final pillar of F.A.S.T, tech-enabled. And this is one of the ones that we've been focusing on in the government sector, in the E-Government sector, the Gov 2.0, Web 2.0 sector, the government as platform sector, focusing on the tech enablement of government. And again, I would suggest, not to be trite about it, but as a new way of thinking, this is about going beyond e-government. This is post-e-government. There has been enough success and enough focus on e-government, but now we need to focus on government in the digital world. The E is part of government, not something separate from it. Tech-enabled government, specifically and foremost, encourage and recruit a tech-savvy workforce. I've worked with governments large and small, the state of California, the U.S. government, on recruiting and developing tech-enabled workforces, hiring, training, advancement, rewarding tech savviness as part of the government worker experience. That's how the business world has transformed itself, by creating workforces that take advantage of the digital world and all the tools and data at our disposal. We have to do that as government agencies and practitioners. Tech-enabled governments think in terms of real time. Again, that's one of the hallmarks of the rise of the web, social media. Everything is real time. We have to embrace that, address that, and make it part of the way we provide government and governance. Real-time data, but also real-time decisions. Making decisions in a timely manner, empowering our workforces, empowering our managers, empowering our leaders to make decisions in a timely manner. Real-time service delivery, delivering services in a responsive manner, where they're needed, when they're needed, in the manner they're needed. And finally, real-time engagement. Again, one of our, regardless of where we fit, each one of us as individuals fit within the government framework, your government, your agency. We are all representatives of the government, and we need to be engaging our constituents. Tech-savvy and tech-enabled governments enable that engagement throughout the government structure. Tech-enabled governments are interconnected and leverage those interconnections. Everything from mobile, pervasive computing, the rise of social media and social networking, the web. Again, turning this into a positive, using that interconnectedness for us to make better decisions, deliver better services, and provide more participation. This piece is very important. Again, tech-enabled governments don't think about technology as technology, but rather think about how technology is infused throughout our government processes, throughout our service delivery channels, throughout our communications, throughout our decision-making infrastructure. Again, it's changing the equation, turning it on its head, not to focus on the technology, but to focus on the service delivery, to focus on governance, and think about how technology is simply a part of that fabric. And finally, tech-enabled governments think in terms of data coursing throughout government. Every day, all the time, everything we do is an opportunity to measure, to get data, to provide input and feedback. And our data are dynamic. We engage user-generated data, visualized data, using the tools of technology. Tech-enabled governments utilize the tools of technology to turn data truly into knowledge and valuable assets that help us as government practitioners. Again, the relevancy of the tech-enabled pillar. It's a holistic view of government. We get to see everything, a 360 view of our government, our agency, our business unit, our governance. Data-driven processes and services, changing the way we think about and view what we do as government practitioners. And finally hitting that holy grail, if you will, that ideal goal of true interoperability between units, between governments at different levels, between governments of different jurisdictions, and between the different sectors, government, private, public, and civil. Closing up here in a few minutes so we can get into the discussion and ask some questions. F.A.S.T. government is really an advanced state of governance whereby governments shepherd, and we at the World Economic Forum specifically chose the word shepherd rather than direct or dictate or deliver. Government changes to a partner in the F.A.S.T. government framework. Governments shepherd better delivery of public services, networked services, efficient services, streamlined and responsive services, potentially actually working with extra-governmental providers of services as opposed to thinking that only governments can deliver those services. F.A.S.T. governments shepherd open, transparent, accountable, and innovative governance. Again, thinking about fostering transparency as opposed to dictating transparency. Shepherding open data, open public discourse, as opposed to managing or directing public discourse. F.A.S.T. governments shepherd greater and more meaningful participation among all the constituents in society. Individuals, citizens, families, social actors, civil society organizations, businesses of all sizes, and other governmental actors. And then finally, not to use an overused term, innovation, fast governments shepherd and foster innovation, but in a meaningful manner across economic, societal, and government subject areas. This is not something that government is generally noted for, innovation, and certainly not fostering innovation outside of the walls of government. But that really has to become part of the job, if you will, of government and government practitioners. Here's some thoughts, some issues, some discussion items that I think we could start off on today and that I'll be following up on in other workshops that I'll be delivering over the next couple of months. How does the FAST government framework, how can it help stimulate high-performance government, thinking of high-performance government in its direct impact on you as practitioners, as government leaders, as government administrators, as managers of public resources? Collaboration. Certainly the FAST government framework focuses on collaboration. And again, thinking about 3 different areas of collaboration. Intra-governmental collaboration, breaking down the silos and walls within your governmental entity, whether that's a business unit, an actual national government, a department or division, whatever your governmental entity is, how do you break down the silos and walls within that entity? Intra-governmental collaboration. Intergovernmental collaboration, thinking of borderless governance and services. One of the biggest research findings out there in the new digital world, especially with respect to government, is that our constituents, our citizens, especially the younger citizens, don't really care anymore who provides what to them. They just want to get what they desire, whether it's a driver's license, whether it's unemployment benefits, whether it's the application for a business license or permit, whatever it is. They truly don't care what part of government provides that or even whether government provides that. They simply want it provided and they want fast access to it. So we want to think about that sort of borderless governance, borderless provision of services, borderless between governments at different levels and certainly borderless between governments of different jurisdictions. And then finally, building on that thought, the cross-sectoral collaboration, building public-private, public-civil, private-civil, public-private-civil partnerships. This is the new world order we live in, where different actors in society work together and engage each other. Government has to be part of that equation as well. I think some of the most innovative things we're seeing in governments across the globe are reaching out and building partnerships with the private sector or with civil society sector to deliver better services, to deliver new programs, to provide and gather new data and information. Here's another area in terms of stimulating high-performance government. What can you think of, what can we think of doing and changing in terms of becoming better, more productive government practitioners? How do we utilize data? Again, as I mentioned previously, the access to data, the development of data is one of the most exciting things happening in the new digital world, in the world of the web. Structured data, unstructured data, user-generated data. Those are all opportunities for us as government practitioners to really leverage something new to provide better services. Utilizing data, providing open access to data, to businesses, to citizens, to see what they think about data, how they can use data, how they might respond to the data that we're collecting. Creating, managing, and fostering new types of data. Again, we mentioned bringing other actors into the work of creating better data, getting our users to help us get and generate new and better data. Visualization of data and information. And finally, something that we've seen very effective on the web, mashing up data, recombining data to provide new information, new knowledge that might provide new insights for us as practitioners, as leaders, might provide new insights for our constituents. So again, utilizing data is something that you can actually think about. How do you effectively bring that into your everyday life as a government practitioner, leader, or manager? Another area for stimulating high-performance government, the development of shared services. Thinking about within your entity, across entities, how do you take some of the best things that have been developed, whether they're actual products, assets, services, and sharing them across government, sharing the use of, sharing the findings from that service, that product. Again, it's not something that we as governments often do or are effective at doing. However, it's something that's there for the taking right now. Building those shared services resources, certainly within your own government and within your own government entity, but even more importantly, sharing those across governments and potentially even sharing those services, those products, those assets with the private sector, with the civil society sector, with citizens. High-performance government, using the F.A.S.T. government framework. How can we engage users, customers, and partners more effectively, more responsively, more readily? Again, this is one of the key opportunities with new technologies for engaging our users, not simply asking them or saying, how did we do, but asking them to be part of, how do we do this better? What do you need? Are we providing the right service to you in the right manner? Are there new services that we need? Are there others out there that are providing something better that we should be, who we should be working with? A huge opportunity using new technologies. And finally, and maybe most important, is how do we as managers and leaders foster and shepherd creativity within government? Again, since we are all inside government, we can laugh at ourselves a little bit, but we are not often accused of being overly creative or innovative. Now is the time for us to break out of that and think about, how do we foster creativity? How do we foster innovation? How do we inspire creativity and innovation as government workers, as government leaders, as leaders of our society? I think this is one of the major challenges, and personally one of my calls to action for government workers, government practitioners across the globe, is to really think of a new opportunity for the best and brightest of society to come back to the government workforce, be creative, be innovative, and really lead the changes in the digital world. We'll come back to these in our discussion. Finally, concluding observations on F.A.S.T. government. F.A.S.T. government embodies, I'm going to wait until I can see, now we can see it. F.A.S.T. government embodies more open and transparent government. That's a call across the globe. Open and transparent in terms of decisions, processes, data. This is something about building trust back into our relationship with our constituents. F.A.S.T. government encourages more connected governance and citizen participation, utilizing new technology tools, re-engaging our citizens, engaging citizens, businesses, societal organizations in governance. F.A.S.T. government creates, fosters, and relies on open data, open and better information, and a renewed emphasis on collaboration. Those are foundational pieces of the F.A.S.T. government framework, and something we, again, those are areas that we can focus on actually executing and acting upon. F.A.S.T. government not only relies on, but leverages all the new technology tools at our disposal, specifically new cloud technologies that are becoming viable, new Web 2.0 and even Web 3.0 technologies, social media, social networking, and other strategic approaches that have come out of the digital and the web world. Those really make F.A.S.T. government feasible. help us execute fast government. However, that is not fast government in and of itself. This is not E-Government. This is fast government, flat, agile, streamlined, and tech-enabled. And then finally, the human factor in fast government and in any government. We just spoke about enhancing and stimulating creativity, innovation, change within government. No matter what we do, the human factor is paramount, and leadership and innovation are required to make it all happen, to really make fast government happen. We cannot neglect or ignore the human factor. And on that note, I'll turn the floor back over to Ali for discussion. I thank you all. Please feel free to contact me and engage me at any time. And I'm open for questions and discussions. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Dr. Craig. Folks, now we're open for the question and answers. If you have a question, you can either raise your hand. You can see that hand icon on your webinar console, or you could equally post the question in the chat box. I already noticed there are some questions in the chat box, but if you want to speak up, then you need to raise your hand and I will be able to unmute you. Okay. While you decide, let me go over to the chat box and start reading a few of the questions which is already posted. There's one from Brother Ahmed to Dr. Craig. What are the main bureaucratic challenges you have observed within governments for launching fast governments or e-government?
Perfect question, and thank you for the question. The main bureaucratic challenges to fast government is bureaucracy itself.
Okay.
And I don't mean to make that sound too minimal, but as a political scientist, as an administrative scientist, I believe we are still building our government frameworks, our government administrative science around 20th century at best administrative science. The previous bureaucratic and civil science frameworks. And I believe we really have to just disabuse ourselves of bureaucracy and think about that agile piece of governance where hierarchy is actually the enemy of fast government. Too much linear, you heard me talk about that previously, too much linear thinking. Fast government is about agile processes, iterative processes, and collaborative processes. And bureaucratic processes, while excellent for ensuring deliberative decisions and fighting corruption often, are actually the enemy of fast government. And I really, truly believe we have to rethink Weberian bureaucracy in its entirety in this new 21st century. And I would challenge us all to really think about a new theory, a new science of government. I hope that wasn't too high level, but anywhere we can break down some of the bureaucratic processes, I think we are fostering fast government.
All right. Thank you very much. I think I noticed some raised hand. Let me find out. Hi, is this Ashura Dora? I'm not sure. Did you raise your hand, Ashura? Hello? Ashura, can you hear us? Okay, I think. Okay, let me move to the next question. It's from Brother Sultan, asking, any specific case study examples you can touch base or recommend for de-organize on fast government for us to benchmark?
Excellent. Excellent question. I'm going to bring a case study which I am living through right now here in California. Again, California, while a state would be one of the largest governmental entities on the planet right now. And while recently, over the last year and a half, driven primarily by the economic crisis in the United States and specifically in California, and driven by the political and budget crisis in California, the government of California, for the first time in certainly my history, and certainly that I know of in California history, got rid of a huge governmental infrastructure. In California, we had a governmental infrastructure called redevelopment agencies, which were large bureaucratic agencies that were formed in any county, any municipal area throughout California to take tax funding and use those tax funds to stimulate specifically redevelopment, trying to redevelop and enhance blighted areas, usually in economic zones that were specifically described as blighted areas. This has been around for about 25 years. Those entities, those redevelopment agencies, grew and expanded and actually became they were entities unto themselves and became kind of shadow governments. And while many of them had done very good work, they were kind of had outlived their initial mission, their initial charge. And yet they continued to expand, continued to grow, continued to take incremental taxes, and they went from actually redeveloping blighted areas, areas that were economically disadvantaged, to becoming pretty much developers, actually building tall buildings. And just over the last year, it was a very painful process, but the government disestablished them. It was a very painful process that just took effect over the last few months, and basically one of the few very good examples of deorganizing. Now, I hesitate to use it as a model case study, but it was a case study. It did not happen in a very streamlined fashion. I think in the future, it would be an excellent case study in terms of organizing redevelopment agencies in response to a very, very obvious need. Economic disadvantaged areas needing assistance in stimulating economic activity and economic development. As soon as that economic area that was the focus of the public benefit is on its feet and stable, we should deorganize that redevelopment agency. So again, it's an example, not necessarily a model example, but sort of the halting, the slow progress towards this. On that note, and I'd like to encourage everybody, over the next year at the World Economic Forum, we are going to be collecting tools and case studies on all of these pillars and ideas. And if you have them from your own experience, your own agency, or what you've seen, we'd love to collect these. But thank you. That was an excellent question and one of the few examples that I've seen thus far.
Well, thank you very much. It would be nice if you could also share those case studies with us, Dr. Greg. I mean,
absolutely.
Anytime.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to further share it with our audience. Okay, I see. I mean, there are a couple of questions posted in the chat box, and since we have 10 more minutes, I would rather go over and straight start reading those questions for Dr. Greg. There's another interesting one. The question says, there has been studies and survey findings on effectiveness of e-government or fast governments. Has there been any study on gauging the productivity of fast governments post-implementation?
The short answer is no, because this is still very new. As I said, the F.A.S.T government framework was just sort of developed by our group over the past, I'd say, 6 months, and was just announced and launched by World Economic Forum in this past June and July. And this next year or 2 years is where we will be piloting, developing the model and implementing it in pilot studies. So I'm sorry that we don't have currently any good research or direct research on the impact or the effectiveness of F.A.S.T government. However, one of the things we will be doing over the next 2 years is developing those tools for measuring F.A.S.T government, benchmarking F.A.S.T government, similar to what others have done with E-Govt out there over the past decade. Although we want to make our tools and our measurement tools much more useful, if you will, and impactful. And again, I would welcome responses or ideas for how best to measure the effectiveness. I think it's a very good question. We don't want to fall prey to putting out something new like F.A.S.T government and then not being able to measure and shape its impact. I think that was one of the early deficiencies of e-government. Everybody, quote unquote, did e-government without ever really thinking about, was it effective, was it changing anything, were we gaining any benefits from it. I think it took a good decade or even 12 years before e-government started to find its real place. And right now I still see quite a bit of dismantling of e-government services because it actually turned out to be more costly, less effective. We don't want to fall prey to that. So I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't have yet any studies or good research, but as soon as we start the research and the benchmarking, this will all be published and all become part of the open discussion through the World Economic Forum.
Okay, thank you very much. Another interesting one, Brother Naeem. In your experience, governments who are adopting F.A.S.T, where do they lack focus on F.A.S.T? Is it to be in agile, streamlined, or tech-enabled areas?
Which of the rephrase the question? Yeah, which of the 4 pillars or which of the areas?
They're slow or sluggish partner.
Yes, I would say the agile piece is the hardest piece for governments to embrace. This actually ties back to the initial question about the failings of bureaucratic structures. Agile, the concept of agility, agile, fluid and ever-changing government structure is actually has tension with what we think of government structures, bureaucratic, very, very knowable, understandable structures. So that agile piece, I believe, is by far the hardest piece for governments to embrace and effectively change. And I think part of it is because in some instances they may actually have to change structures or change even certain regulatory processes in order to be agile. And I think secondly, and I'll be very, very blunt and forceful about this, and would encourage a response on this, I think our government education, certainly in the United States, certainly the schools that I've worked with, schools of government, schools of public administration, are teaching outdated and old administrative and government science. And we are not teaching our future leaders and practitioners how to be agile, how to think about being agile, and the tools of agility, how to work in teams, how to think in project and program mode as opposed to simply thinking linearly. So the agile pillar is by far the slowest to change and probably the hardest to change.
Okay, thank you very much. And this one is really interesting. Somebody asked, could security concerns for possible leakages become a hurdle for some government to adopt F.A.S.T as it demands usage of shared services, open access, etc.? If not, then how do we convince bureaucracy or leadership to adapt it without any fear?
Yeah, great question and perfectly on point. To the first part of your question, absolutely yes. In a recent forum in Istanbul introducing F.A.S.T government to European and Middle East and North African nations, that was one of the key issues of discussion was security concerns. If F.A.S.T government fosters, enables, and really promotes openness and sharing of everything from information to decision-making processes, doesn't that set us up for possible security issues such as leakages? Possibly it does. And that could be a crutch. It could be a valid issue for governments to slow down the adoption or implementation of F.A.S.T government. I think we would argue security concerns are always there no matter what type of government tools we use. They're always going to be there. whether they're cybersecurity, which I've written about, whether they're physical security concerns. And simply we have to engage the security community in our F.A.S.T government implementation, in our discussions, in our development of the framework, so that those security concerns are at least, or at least we are at least as confident as we are now in the future. And I think that is really the only answer for governments to simply take the knee-jerk reaction of, well, that may open up more data or leakages, and therefore we won't do it. That's too simplistic of an answer. On the second part of the question, how do we encourage governments to move forward with this? That is our mission right now. That is why I am on this webinar with you. That's why I am out doing workshops, speaking widely. That's why the World Economic Forum has raised the F.A.S.T government framework to the very top of its agenda. Even at the Davos Forum, F.A.S.T government will be put out there. We do have to encourage governments to take the risk. The rewards will be bigger, will be much bigger than the risks. But like anything within government, we have to be prudent. We have to implement and execute in a prudent manner, measure the impact, measure the changes. But we do have to think about F.A.S.T government as transformational. It's not an incremental change. We are enlisting governments, we are enlisting agencies, we are enlisting innovative business units of government to really embrace F.A.S.T government as models and to make these transformational changes. But I do think that's going back to the idea of it takes leadership, it takes managerial efficiency, and it takes creativity to make these changes come to fruition.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there is another short one which we can perhaps take and conclude on it. How do you define Government 2.0, or is it a subset of F.A.S.T?
Good question. I think one of the bullets I had on there previously was F.A.S.T government is going beyond e-government and even beyond Government 2.0. I think Government 2.0, and not to argue with Tim O'Reilly or any of the other thinkers out there, maybe it's really Government 3.0. One of the key facets of Government 2.0 that I think F.A.S.T government embodies, and therefore I think to answer your question directly, Government 2.0 becomes a key component of F.A.S.T government, is F.A.S.T government really starts to create that idea of government as a platform, which is one of the themes and ideas out there of Gov 2.0, is that government becomes a platform as opposed to simply a director and a provider. It's a platform for creativity, for innovation, for delivery of services. So I not only I believe, I'm positing the idea that Gov 2.0 is subsumed within the F.A.S.T government framework. It's still very, very important and a very important part of how we as governments and government practitioners engage our communities and provide better services, but it's a part of F.A.S.T government rather than something separate. Good question, and it's a good way to think about this transformation and this evolution of government.
Well, thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of the webinar, and indeed a very, very interesting presentation, Dr. Curtin, and quite an eye-opening, which tells the governments who are not going to be flat or practice agility or streamline the processes or adopt the latest technologies, they would certainly be not ready for the 21st century. With that, I would like to thank you very much, Dr. Curtin, on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, for your time and willingness to share this valuable information and your experiences with our participants. Also, thanks to all of you who participated, and we are glad you could join us today and hope the session was helpful for you. We will be emailing you the link to a recorded version of this webinar in a couple of days once it's updated on our website. A quick note, please do visit our website to find out more about our upcoming high impact programs in 2012, specifically about this high performance government HPG2, for which we are currently accepting applications and enrollments. And just to keep you all informed that Dr. Craig will be also joining us for HPG2 in Madinah, inshallah. Once again, thank you very much, everybody, and specifically and particularly to Dr. Craig for your time and your willingness to share this information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will be now I will be ending the webinar, so you will all be automatically dismissed